AJ. It is now time for Rex Brandstatter Senior Talk, and that's brought to you by the Solon American Legion and Senior Benefits. How are you doing today, Rex?
Well, great, Molly. Absolutely, on a day like this. Gee whiz, we've got some hot weather coming down the pike, but we're going to take what we have today. A little rain, we can deal with it. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for Senior Talk, and I'm so glad you're with me today. Greetings and welcome from me here on Senior Talk. It's a great day to be here with you, and a great day to be a senior, and for sure, it's when you're a senior, it's always a great day if you're with us, if you know what I mean. Well, that's my feeling today, and I really do like this weather. We're going to take it because we can't do anything about it, A, except complain about it, and B, it's not too bad out there. It's going to get hot over the weekend, and I like it that way. Speaking of over the weekend, this Saturday is the annual vernal or the semi-annual vernal equinox, where the sun is going to reach its northernmost point. It'll be directly overhead at the Tropic of, remember this from science class, you have two choices, Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer. And if you're like me, I always had to put a little lingo together to remember which is which, and I did that. But it's going to be this Saturday, the longest day of the year, and then it's going to be at the Tropic of Cancer, by the way. And then we get slapped in the face because the sun turns around and goes back down to South America. What a joke. That's terrible. We got beat out of a nice spring, in my opinion, because all the winds we have for many days, we had so chilly for all those times. We got beat out of a nice spring. And now that the sun is here, it's going to be hot. Now the sun's going to turn around and hightail it back down south. So we're going to deal with it anyhow. That's what we're going to do. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and joining me here on Senior Talk. And do my best every week to bring important things that might render some help to you in certain aspects of your life, or your friends or acquaintances down at the grocery store, or where you meet every day and have a cup of coffee, or with some of your friends groups, things like that. Just trying to bring things up that might be of importance. It could be, I just had a text from a lady, a friend of mine, maybe an email, I forget which one now, and said that she just got remarried. And she's wondering if she should change her name to reflect that, because she's a power of attorney for her father, and most likely she says part of the will. So should she change her name? And I said, well, in my opinion, not being an attorney, my opinion would be yes. And the reason for that, it is a simple form. It's a name change form. And just call your attorney. Your attorney can whip that up for you, nothing flat. And you can file that at Johnson County Courthouse so that something happens to your dad. They say, well, you're not Jane Smith, you're now Jane Jones. You'd have to fill out an affidavit of identity. And so why not do it now when everybody knows about it and everybody's around to do it? So I thought that was a good tip. I hope that attorney sees it that way, and I hope they take care of it. So, tell you what, as we go forward with the Senior Talk, it's great to have you here. I want you to consider, can't tell you what to do, consider sitting down, getting yourself a sandwich and a nice cold root beer, and let's see what we can cook up here. So, my name is Rex Brandstatter. I'm 75 years old, and I'm a real estate broker, and I like to work and talk and meet with seniors. And I started working almost exclusively with seniors, not always, but about 95% senior families, seniors and their families. We meet at your kitchen table, at a coffee shop, at my office. I deal with the trust departments of banks. I deal with attorneys, CPAs call me. I deal with estates, deal with executors, administrators. That's the type of thing that I prefer to deal with, and do my best to help you out if you get in situations like that. Now, what I do have situations, a lot of are powers of attorney, and now it's time for mom to go somewhere, or dad, or both, to go somewhere independent living, and the real estate, what do we do with that? Now maybe dad has passed away, what do we do with all the things inside? You can call me with questions on that, and I'll tell you how I handle those things. You may have a senior line at 319-330-5534, 330-5534. We can certainly have a good talk and see if I can be of help to you. Because trust me, I met with a lady the other day, and she's inherited 4 different people in her family have passed away within the last couple of years, and she ended up with all their stuff. She's underwater with stuff, trust me. Wow, that's what I can help you with for sure. I want to take a little nod here, a little tip of my old baseball hat here. I got a text from a good friend of mine this morning that said, as of today, Iowa City High School and Iowa City local lore and legend Bob Oldest, as of today, is not his birthday, but he is 97 and a half, right at that. 97 and a half years old, and he lives down in Arizona. And Bob's picture was, City High won, excuse me, the 46, I believe, Iowa High School basketball state tournament. When I was at City High, there was a great big picture of that team, big blown up picture of the coach and all the players in their uniforms, and they must have just won it like a half hour before that. It's a great picture, and it probably out there in the City High common area now, I assume. So I've been in there, but I never paid much attention. I guess I didn't remember. And so there's Bob Oldest. Bob Oldest was a wonderful, wonderful baseball player at City High, and he went on to play in the major leagues for many years. I talked to him one time, and he says, "So you're a Dodger fan?" Yeah. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I once got 2 hits off Sandy Koufax." I said, "You did not?" He said, "I did too." So I didn't question him. Wow. And Tommy Lasorda, who was the manager of the Dodgers at the time, he was in town. I went down to talk to Tommy Lasorda, and I said, "Name me 2 baseball players from Iowa City." He said, "I don't know any." I said, 2, yes, you do. Bob Oldest. "Oh, for God's sakes, that's right, Bob Oldest. Say hi to him for me." So he said, "Yeah, when I was in Philadelphia, when the Oldists moved to Philadelphia, they rented our apartment from us. So there you go." And then he said, "Well, who's the other one?" I said, "Well, he was a knuckleballer. I went to City High School and for the Baltimore Orioles." "I don't know." I said, "Eddie Watt." So there you go, folks. That's some baseball lore from Iowa City. And they both played for City High. And Eddie Watt graduated in 1959. He was a pitcher, all-star pitcher. He played for the Orioles forever and played for other teams too. And Bob Oldest, my friend Bob Oldest, he's everybody's good friend. What a guy he is. So that's the story. Well, listen, the heat and humidity have arrived, and there's more on the way. And I will tell you that when I was down here last week, the corn was about 1 foot tall, and right now the corn is about 3 feet tall. So in the last week with the heat and humidity, it's gone, and it really, really looks good. It makes it look and feel like Iowa. So, well, I have to tell you that lots and lots of seniors are out and about. We went to see, get this, my wife and I we went to see the Glenn Miller Orchestra last week at the Corville Theater, last Thursday night, matter of fact. And I grew up, and she did too, whenever our parents, my mom and dad bought they called it a hi-fi, and it was a big, long piece of furniture. It had enough furniture in it to build a garage under today's world. And in there, inside of it was a place for they could keep store 33 and a third RPM records, and then it had record player and 2 big speakers, one that sat on either side of the thing, and it was great. Now the problem with it was my brother and I had to experience Glenn Miller, Lawrence Welk, Perry Como albums all the time until we snuck in some of our stuff we wanted to hear in the 60s. So listening to Glenn Miller was like living at home again back in the late 50s and 60s. And my folks bought that piece of furniture down at Sutton Radio and TV. Okay, that's how long ago it was. So there it was. Well, at the Corville Theater last week, my wife and I were both 75 years old, and we felt young in there that night. Now, yes, there were a few younger people, but not many. It was a north of 75 night, and the place was, I'm going to say, 85% to 90% full. And the performance by the Glenn Miller Orchestra was wonderful, and they played all the old tunes. And the director stood up and talked about Glenn Miller's history and past history and his unfortunate demise in World War II and things like that. So it was a good time, and just the things that seniors can do. And trust me, that means it showed me that the older than 75 crowd is still out and about, willing to go enjoy themselves for sure. A great time for me last week came as a call from a senior, and it kind of went like this. It's from a senior man. "A month or so ago, you said that we should tour our house and find the water meter and the main shutoff, the location of the gas meter, the location of the electric panel, locate all the keys to all the doors, change the furnace filters and stuff like that." I said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "I think you should do all those things." So absolutely you should do that. He said, "Well, we decided to do even more last week." So we did. We did a tour of the exterior and yielded the site of our original wood deck. He said, we were looking for this, maybe a siding or something like you said, maybe a cracked window or some caulking. And he said, we actually got to the backyard and took a look at our original wood deck. And he said, we've been in our house a little over 25 years. He said, honestly, now, Rex, he said, it looked pathetic. The wood steps had some issues. One of them was kind of twisted. Two of them are rotted. He said, I went over and put my full weight on it. One of them just broke in half. Wow. He said, it was just terrible. He said, it looked like it was 100 years old. Now, folks, I see this all the time when I show up our houses, and you look at the deck, and the decks, nobody pays any attention to them. They're on the back side of the house. You don't pay. They're wooden decks, and probably use just treated lumber at the time. And after 20, 25 years being out in the hot sun and humidity in the winters we have, it's not in good shape. So the guy says, we just hired a guy to tear it up and replace it with man-made products. There you go. The new wood products and the metal railings, thing like that. We all get this. So he said, it looks great. We even use it more now. We bought a new grill. We got there. He said, we are now using our deck. Good for us. Is what he said. He said, we also looked into every room, every closet, every drawer over a period of a weekend. Now, these folks have at it hardcore. We took 9 big trash bags full of clothes to Goodwill. We took a lot of junk out to the landfill, and lo and behold, he says, get this, we found things we forgot we even had. And he said, here's even as fun as anything else. I was going to say more funner. My old English teacher would kick my butt. We actually had a good time once we got started, and now the house feels bigger, more open, and, of course, we have that new deck. And he said, now our new barbecue. So I said, thank you for the tips. And I said, well, I didn't mean to cause you to get a new deck. And he said, well, we wouldn't have known about it unless we'd gone and walk around with a good eye and good opinions to do all those things. So good. I said, good for you. Congratulations to you. You not only did your deck thing, but that increased the safety of the deck, the usability of the deck. So more power to you. Now, it also makes your house worth more money. Decks are very expensive. I don't know the size of this deck, but I'm going to tell you, the guy spent $12,000 to $20,000 to redo the deck. That is for sure. So I said, thank you for accepting my challenge, and good for you. All right. Wow. Pretty good story there, folks. Pretty good for sure. If you don't have the deck issue, you could at least take a tour of the inside of your house and do what these folks did. Just start at the smallest room, start with the smallest drawer, and just start getting rid of stuff. I can't sit here and tell you how many seniors I talk to in a week's time, a month's time, and they all say we have too much stuff. What are we going to do with all this stuff? I have seniors tell me they can't move because we have too much stuff. So I always say, well, does your stuff run you, or do you run your stuff? And I say, well, yeah, I know. Well, you answer the question yourself. All right. Well, a senior says, our grandson is visiting this summer for 5 weeks. He's 15 and a really nice and smart kid. We think we will work with him to help him get his driver's license permit. What do you think? I said, well, I would be all for that. He's 15 and doesn't have it. You can get it when you're 14. So I said, is he under the auspices of his parents? And the answer to that is yes. He's a minor. And I said, what might their thoughts be on this thing? So it's either their daughter or son. They didn't say which one. So I said, your intentions are good, but he's your grandson, not your son. So with those good intentions, I think I'd fire up the telephone, give them a call, and say, you've got a huge, smart idea. And I would phrase it from the very positive and optimistic side. You've got a great idea. Now that Johnny is visiting, now is a great time for him to go down and take his driver's test, and Grandpa and Grandma can both teach him how to drive, what to drive in their hands, safe hands, and things like that. He could go take his test and get his driver's permit, and then when he returns home in a month or so, he'd have an Iowa driver's permit, not a license, but a permit. So I said, I think that would be the best route for you to do. Would be to go that way. I said, they may say, oh yeah, we haven't had time to do that, or the town is so big we have to sit in line so long. Go get started and just check with mom and dad first. That would be the best. All right. A senior couple says, 4 years ago, we decided to get young again. I said, okay. He said, we bought a small camper and a nice used pickup truck. I said, well, there you go. So it's a pull-behind camper, they later told him. We only camp in Iowa. And we have a lot of fun challenging ourselves. We camp at night, but during the day we go to the local attractions. Wherever we go, we park. We find a campground that we can drive to. But during the day, we don't sit around the campgrounds. We go in the local towns and any attractions that might be there, any parks. Maybe we might go see a movie if it's a crappy day, things like that. A museum if we can find one. He says, we absolutely love it. So here's a couple that says 4 years ago, so they've been at it. They decided to get young again. They bought a camper, a pull-behind camper, it sounded like, and a pickup truck, and so now away they go. Now, that does sound like fun. You really, really don't have to leave Iowa. You can go across the river to Minnesota if you're going to camp, or Minnesota to Illinois. A place like that are pretty close. You know, Missouri's not very far. Minnesota's not very far. There you go. So good for them. My thumb is up for them. More power to them. Wow. Now, a lot of you camp. A lot of you are already doing this thing. So if it makes you feel young again, I think that's what you need to do. The fact that during the day you don't just sit around the campfire in your lawn chair, that these folks unhook the pickup truck and they go to town, see the local what's going on in town, and try to hunt down a museum that they probably looked up on the internet where they could go, that type of thing. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful sport, and they said they really, really like doing it. So we love to do it. A senior man calls and says to me, I'm considering organizing my garage. And then he said to me, why is the scuttle hole to the attic out in the garage caulked shut? He said, our house is less than 20 years old. He said, I look up there all the time when I finally realize where it was and what it was, because it's recessed up in the garage ceiling. He said, it's recessed up in there about 6 to 8 inches, and it's a size of a 3x5 type of thing, a little bit less than a flag is what he said. Oh, that's the scuttle hole to your attic of your garage. He said, why is it caulked shut? And here's the answer to that. The answer to that is in the new homes, and it has been for several years, the International Building Code says that the garage needs to be encapsulated in sheetrock. And the wall between the garage and the house has to be, I think it's 2 layers of 5-inch type of thing. And the ceiling, I believe, is a 5/8, one layer of 5/8. And the walls can be a 1/2 inch. If I'm right, if I'm lying, I'm dying, but that's what I think. So that means your garage is totally surrounded by sheetrock, and you can see the obvious trend here. The obvious goal is that if your car catches on fire or the lawnmower and the gasoline, blah, 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 the fire department can get there while it could hopefully still be contained to the garage. So you only have damage to the garage. Now, you might lose your car and your lawnmower type of thing, but maybe hopefully you wouldn't lose your whole house. Now, here's the other side of the coin there. Well, we like to, Rex, we have an attic in our garage, and we need access to that. We need one of those pull-down ladder things. Well, due to this code, you won't find a contractor that will do that. They can't. They cannot do that because then they won't get an occupancy permit, and you won't be able to move into the house. So a contractor can't do that. The day after you buy the house, you could have that contractor. I don't know if he will do it, but he sure documented it was that you called him and it was after it was closed. I'm not sure they'll come back and do it. Maybe a different contractor. Maybe you do it yourself. You can go buy one, and you can take a good knife, and you can cut that opening, go around the edge, cut that, and tap on it from down below, and that it will come up one big board, one piece of sheetrock will pop up, and you can get at it. You can get access up there. You'd have to go up there and lay the flooring in and stuff like that. That's what that is. He said, well, thank you so much for answering that question. I said, absolutely. I said, just remember that the stuff is there for a reason, and if you breach that, you could be setting yourself up for trouble if there was a fire. And I'm not so sure your insurance man or insurance lady is going to like that. I don't know what's in your insurance policy regarding that. I haven't gone up in the attic of my garage. I don't want to cut that open. I'm going to leave it alone unless there was an emergency and the fire department had to get there. They're going to go up there anyhow. They'll just barge their way up in it in order to get there. So that's the story. All right. And then he said, he said a statement, and I really, really agree with him on this one. He said, those big recycling bins on wheels sure are space hogs. And I have to agree with you. And we have two in Corville. We have one for your garbage to put out, and then we have one the same size for recycling things. And so it takes space. Fortunately, when we build our garage, I build it bigger than the average bear, so I'd have some space like that. So there you go. Your garage is your number one place for your car and your truck, and make sure you have enough space to get in and get out of them easily, and make sure you can back out and drive in easily. That's easier said than done sometimes, but that's kind of what goes around. Well, I want to remind you that this weekend the days will start getting shorter. And you think, oh, that can't be true. Well, it is. So Saturday's the longest day, and then things are going to start to get shorter. And we all know how that is. That's no fun because it's going to get shorter until December. Going to get shorter until December. It's the way the world is. So, well, you wake up one day and you're 60 or 65 or 70 or 75. And that means that you now get to enjoy and take advantage of what you put together for yourself for retirement over all the years. All right, did you follow that? You wake up, all of a sudden you're 60 or 65 or 70 or 75, and now you get to take advantage of whatever retirement plan that you put together all the years that you had time to do it. You have Social Security income, average check now is $1,900. Maybe you have a pension, a 401k, IRAs, stocks, dividends, mortgages, reverse mortgage income, maybe have that, rental income. Now's the time to stretch your stuff. Now's the time to sit back and say, here's what I put together, now here's what we're going to do. 50% of Americans over age 65 only have the monthly check from Social Security. 50% of Americans over 65 only have Social Security income. Wow. Wow. Yeah, I think that's just the thing. The 60% of Americans cannot handle a $600 emergency. The brakes are out of the car, furnace is making a funny noise, and the guy says it's going to be $850 to fix the motor, blah, blah, blah. Well, 60% of Americans cannot handle that. How are they going to handle it? Oh, they're going to get on the credit card, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. These are just realizations that you don't maybe realize so much until you're finally to the end of the trail, work trail, we're going to call it. And okay, now I made myself a big chart several years ago when I was in my mid-50s, and I said, here's what I think I'm going to have. And I didn't know the numbers, but the sources. I laid out the sources, and in them, every year I'd update, every year, like religiously. And as I got towards 60 and 62, and I started getting letters from Social Security and things like that, I started to put the pieces together and met with the financial people again, and I started to put together a plan for myself. And that's it is what it is. And if you don't do the plan, you won't know to the end of the trail, and I didn't think that was any fun. So I started planning for it in my mid-50s, and I started planning. The plan started when I first started to work. I knew that I wanted to save some money and do some things for one day I didn't want to or couldn't work. Now, a lot of people work, but they really work because they have to. Now, what happens if they have to work, but all of a sudden physically they cannot work? And that happens. You have a stroke, you break your leg, you have some sort of a health issue, and you can't go to work, and now you're 67 years old or 73 years old, and you have to work to pay the mortgage. Well, you're going to get what you put together, and that's the hard part, because a lot of people didn't put anything together for themselves. I don't like to report that, but that is what's going on. Say I got a call this week from a gentleman who says, I'm looking at probably needing a cemetery plot. And I said, there's no probably to it. You're going to need a cemetery plot. And he said, how many? I said, if we get cremated, my wife and I are cremated, can we get two of us on one lot? I said, yes, you can. And I said, you have to call your local cemetery, wherever you plan on going, and ask them those questions, because they all have rules for that, and you better go by the correct rules at the proper cemetery. All right. I'm reading a book now. I always have some kind of a book going, different things that I always kind of want to learn about in history. And I'm reading a book about the planning and construction of the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States. Very, very historic and very, very interesting to me. And I don't know a lot about it other than what I have read on articles or maybe seen in the movies or, things like short historical shorts on the television. And the Transcontinental Railroad, as you recall, was put together, and you remember one term that they all met at Promontory Point, Utah, and drove a golden spike. That is true. Well, but the railroad was put together by two railroad companies. One started on the West Coast, and one started at Pottawatomie County, Iowa. One started in Council Bluffs, and one started in California. So the one that started in the Midwest in Council Bluffs and Omaha was the Central Pacific. A brand new railroad they started. We're going to call it the Central Pacific. All right? And, the Union Pacific. And so get that. Here's the history of this thing so far in this book. President Abraham Lincoln made the Union Pacific a company in 1862 because we already had a railroad in the Midwest. And in 1855, the farthest the railroad went was Iowa City. And in this book, it talks about Iowa City already. All right. Well, Lincoln decided that after all this time that Congress had been going back and forth, couldn't get anything done on the need, and then the Civil War breaks out. Lincoln decided, he took the personal role that he decided that the Transcontinental Railroad, he made it a war effort. And he could have got anything done under the guise, we'll call it, of the war effort. So he created a company called the Union Pacific, and he told them, and the head, he put together a team that started out in California, called in the Union Pacific, and they were to lay track and move east. And their laborers, most of their laborers, as you might see in the movies, were Chinese. Absolutely. Big hordes, lots and lots of Chinese were, for the most part, the big gangs of laborers that they used. And from the Central Pacific going west, the big gangs, lots and lots of most more Irish. That is all true. And so away they went. And the first rails were laid in 1865. Now, the first rails were actually, after all this planning, the first rails were laid after Lincoln had been assassinated. So he never got to see it even get started. He came to visit Iowa 3 times during the planning process. He knew all about Iowa City. He knew all about western Iowa and Omaha and Council Bluffs, you bet. So I'm reading this book, and the recent couple chapters or so, I find the name Peter Day, or Peter Dye. It's Peter D-E-Y. And for the life of me, I don't know how he pronounced it, either Day or Dye. I've heard both right here and locally. And the name sounded familiar to me. I said, Peter Dye. I said, well, there is the Dye building in Iowa City. Well, guess what? That's the guy. Peter Dye was the guy. Peter Dye of Iowa City. He was known as the chief railroad builder in America. He was an engineer. Not an engineer on the train, but he was an engineer, professional engineer. He was known as the chief railroad builder in Iowa City, in America, and he lived in Iowa City. Wow. He was the engineer that designed and oversaw the construction of the railroad that came into Iowa City on the M&M Railroad, which was the Mississippi and Missouri line. You remember this story, on December 31st, or New Year's Eve of 1855, they came to town, and with the big $50,000 bonus if they got here by that time, and they did get here. My question in that story was, in the city of Iowa City paid them $50,000. Where did the city of Iowa City in 1855 get $50,000? Well, I have also learned that they had sponsors. They went out to businesses in town that would have yielded a lot of profit from the railroad getting here, and they came up with a whole bunch of money. I don't know how much they came up with, but that was how they came up with. Because I can't imagine the city of Iowa City had $50,000 laying around in 1855. That wouldn't get it, I'm sure. So Peter Dye and his family lived here in Iowa City, and they owned a big. He got in the real estate, not in the real estate business, but he owned some property. And there's, to this day, there is a building called the Day Building or the Day Building. It's in downtown Iowa City. Where is it? Where is the Day Building or the Day Building in Iowa City? It's a well-known building. It's a well-known corner, and it's a very well-known business that's there. And I'll give you a 3, 2, 1. Well, it's the Iowa Book and Supply Building on the southwest corner of Iowa Avenue and Clinton Street. So if you've been in Iowa Book and Supply, if you went to school here, I guarantee you were, that's the Day Building, the Day Building. Okay, that is exactly where it is. Now, a couple things about that. Oddly enough, there are 2 loading elevators on the sidewalk outside. There's one right on the north side of the building and one on the west side. And get this, that's because the building has footings and foundations under it that extend underneath the sidewalk. So when you hear those the doors come open and the bells ring, it comes up really, really slow, by the way. They load they load books and goods they're going to sell on outside there, and they run it down the elevator. They don't have to go in out the door. Pretty unique stuff, huh? I think so. Pretty darn neat. I drove down there to make sure they were still there. They are still there. And when you're downtown walking on the sidewalk, my wife won't walk on water. I walk on them all the time. I walk across them because they haven't caved in yet. Why would they cave in the day I walk on it? And no, because I don't weigh 500 pounds or anything like that. That would be the standard. Oh, you're kind of heavy. No, I'm actually not. So anyhow, there they are. So it's down there. Well, Peter Dye and his wife lived at 507 North Clinton. 507 North Clinton Street. And so I drove up there, sat on the public street in front of a parking meter. There wasn't a car on that side of the street, clear down to almost downtown because the students are gone. And I sat there and looked at that building. It is now the Writers' Workshop building. And if you look at that house, it's on the west side facing east. It's across from it's right around the corner to the south from the University of Iowa President's house. It's across the street from the Tridelt house, across the street from the church up there. Pretty darn neat. And so that's what I did. So the more I read about it, the more I became enthralled with him. So Peter Dye, I looked him up. He is buried out at Oakland Cemetery here in Iowa City with his family. He was president of the Iowa Historical Society. Well, there you go. He was president of the First National Bank in Iowa City for 25 years. So he was not just a resident of town. He was our trained professional engineer working specialized in railroads, but he's also a local businessman. He was one of 3 men to oversee the construction of the new Iowa State Capitol building in Des Moines. They needed his expertise in blueprints and organizing and working with contractors and stuff like that. He was the mayor of Iowa City from 1860 to 1864. Now, think that one through. So if he's the mayor of Iowa City of 1860 to that's Civil War, most likely, I guarantee he met Abraham Lincoln. He knew Lincoln. And the governor of Iowa was who? Who was Iowa's Civil War governor? Also from Iowa City, actually from Coralville. Samuel Kirkwood, who was the brother-in-law of Ezekiel Clark, Ezekiel Clark was brought out here by the Iowa Territory Governor Robert Lucas and his wife Friendly, who live in Plum Grove. Ezekiel Clark was brought out here because the Iowa City Manufacturing Company, which is a separate company. Chauncey Swan, John Ronald Street, Chauncey Swan, Chauncey Park in Iowa City, a couple of guys in that, because they wanted to build a dam, an overhead dam, which they did right out there in Coralville, and get started with a woolen mill, a grist mill, and a flour mill, which they did all 3 of them. So that's who these guys are. It's just made my heart good to read that. And so stop for a minute and say, I've heard of Peter Day, but where? Well, he passed away in 1911, and he's buried out at the Oakland Cemetery with his wife. And there's 9 of them buried out there, I guess. I haven't been out to find that grave, but I'll go do that for sure. So I'd like to take the time to, if you could think of a name you want me to explore, you can look it up. It's just interesting how the local history, we just learned that somebody, a local businessman, was a good friend of Abraham Lincoln. We learned that he was the mayor of Iowa City during the Civil War, and we relearned that Samuel Kirkwood, think Kirkwood Avenue, think Kirkwood Street, Kirkwood Community College, all those things with Kirkwood. That's the guy, Sam Kirkwood. He owned and operated the dam in Corvo. His brother-in-law was Ezekiel Clark, and he was elected to the Iowa Senate when they met in Iowa City. And he rode his horse down to the old Capitol downtown. That's how he got involved. So all this kind of comes around and makes sense. It's so much fun to put some of the pieces together as other people have in the past, and I get to take advantage of a lot of it, and a lot of it I get to do myself. Well, as seniors, one of the problems we have as seniors is, you're running the 100-yard dash, and you can't run in the dash for very long. It comes to the end. That's the hard part. So none of us ever know about our tenure here, and we have to kind of we can't plan that way, can't think like that every day, but we at least in the back of our minds know that we're closer to the final lap here than anybody really realizes. So kind of headed down the back stretch, so to speak. One of the things I think, based on the different things and the seniors I see and talk to and the experience I have around town, is that we're all willing to get out there and do as much as we can, is what I hope you can do. Do all you can while you can. There are some health limitations. I met with a lady the other day who I know very well, and boy, she's not in good shape, and she's the same age I am. She's not in good physical shape, and I was just surprised. But it is what you have to deal with the cards you're playing with, so you have to do your very best to take care of yourself. So I want you to consider a little motto here: do all you can while you can, whatever that may be for you. Whatever that might be. If you go somewhere and go on a big long trip to circle around the world, or go to Solon for an ice cream cone, whatever it is, I think you should do that. So feel free to give me a call. My senior line, happy to talk to you. Senior line is 319-330-5534. 330-5534. I'll help you if I can. If I can't, I will tell you. I'm not going to bug you and call you back and say, oh, you called me, I'm a salesman. That's not what I do. If I can help you, I will call you. If you have a historical thing you want to talk about, give me a call. I've come to the conclusion that my great-great-grandparents watched the Mormons walk past their farm out near Oxford. Another guy and I are working on things like that. They had to go just a little bit to see them, but I guarantee you they saw them. So with all that history in mind and some good senior thoughts and ideas, I thank you so much for joining me, and I want you to take care of yourself. And next week, the days will be shorter, but we'll still be all fired up because the corn's getting better, and we're going to have sweet corn pretty soon. So this is Rex Brandstatter from Senior Talk. My salute to all veterans out there. Thank you for your service and all those serving today. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. So long.
Your life is always changing.